This episode is brought to you by the shows of the You Run Podcast Network, all available at yourunpodcast.com. Whether it's true crime or film reviews, even TV series deep dives, the You Run Podcast Network has you covered. So go and check out yourunpodcast.com today. Today we are starting with a very appropriate quote. You're afraid to dive into the plasma pool, aren't you? You're afraid to be destroyed and recreated, aren't you? Mark, are you afraid?
A bit nervous, yeah, I'll be honest, I am.
Me too. Well, let's see how this goes. You're now listening to Home of Halloween's You Run.
Make it burn, I'ma make it burn. I'ma make it burn, I'ma make it burn.
You are now listening to the You Run podcast.
Before you forget, you want to die.
Sorry, man, I was completely off guard there.
He's in his coffin. He's the undead.
My Dixie Rex.
Guess we're ready for the show then.
Oh, before you forget.
I'll kill you if this is a joke.
Everyone, the You Run Podcast. It's the You Run Podcast.
Hello.
Wow,
Yeah, that's a nostalgia flashback, isn't it?
that makes me feel old, like we've been doing this a really, really long time.
We have been doing this a really, really long time. Hello and welcome to the You Run Podcast horror movie review. My name is Scott.
And my name is Mark.
And we are about to tip this show on its head. So me and Mark had some discussions about how when we started this, the show was very innovative and it was new and it was ahead of the curve, having listener interaction and doing all these really cool things that no other show's done. Every other show kind of caught up and we didn't adapt, and we've kind of been lost in the shuffle a little bit. So because of that, we're making some big changes to the show. Some features that have been with us for a very long time, like 3-word review, are going to be going. We're going to be saying goodbye to 3-word review on this episode, the final ever one. Sad to see 3-word review go, but hey, it's time.
Yeah, I think it's time. I think we need this. I think the listeners need it as well. I think it's going to revitalise the show and keep everything fresh.
Yeah. Some other changes. There's not going to be a trailer anymore. There's also not going to be a full run through of the movie anymore. The next 2 episodes are kind of going to be transitional episodes as we find our new feet and we introduce some new features and we kind of go from there. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to go or where it's going to go, because for the first time ever, I've got no bullet point notes, no scrap, nothing. I feel so naked and afraid.
I've just realised why you asked me if I was afraid. You teed up the perfect reference for this movie and I missed it.
It was even a quote from this movie.
That's my point. Yeah, you were setting me up perfectly and I blew it. I apologise. I guess some things never change.
Exactly that. There are some things that are going to stay. Still get in touch with the show. yourunpodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. Also call the show through X and Instagram using the direct message function. Just record an audio message there. We'll play those on the air. Lots of other interactive features are going to come online. Things are changing. We have got an audio message this week as well. Would you like to hear our audio message?
I would love to hear it, please.
Oh, I completely forgot to mention, because I was gonna try and do like Haktua in like a bunch of different imitations, right? But it's actually difficult. I was trying to do like Scooby-Doo, like the whole Ruh-roh and like, but how do you do Haktua in Scooby? Like, I was trying and I was like, this is not working. So you ended up getting Arnold. But I was going to do Porky Pig. I was getting, I was thinking I was making progress, but because I was like, spit on that thing. But it's like, when I have to start saying other words, it becomes very difficult. So I wasn't, but I'm gonna keep trying, and maybe I can. And then I'm just trying, and then all I can think of is that Sydney Sweeney meme where she's crying, looking in the mirror, and I'm there in the background practicing this shit.
Dave's poor wife.
A huge thank you to Dave. So we've got a bit of a special treat at the end of this episode that will become a thing moving forward, and Dave was a big part of that as well. Dave is one of our longest listeners, and I think it's really appropriate that he sent a message this week. Like, of all the weeks for a message, like the week when we revamp it all, like Dave is here.
An old face.
Yeah. This is how it's going to work moving forward. We're going to give you a synopsis of the movie. We're going to give you a spoiler warning. We're going to tell you what we liked, what we didn't like, talk about favourite scenes, and go wherever the conversation goes. We're going to still give you some facts. At times, there will be a game or a feature spot. On this episode, there is neither. Well, kind of. We got 3-word reviews for the last time. Then we'll give you roundups and scores, and we'll let you get on with your day. Episode run times are probably going to drop down, but I'm hoping that what we give you is more condensed, and instead of giving you a step-by-step of a movie you've seen, we're going to talk about the bits you want us to talk about. Yeah. Let's start with this movie. The Fly tells the story of a scientist attempting to master teleportation and master getting laid. To be fair, he masters both, like, really, really well.
Very, very well.
Very, very well. There is one problem, though. As with most good plans, if a fly gets in the ointment, it causes absolute havoc for your long-term plans. Where do you want to start with this movie? Like, I know it sounds stupid. We've just said we're not doing a run through, but I want to start at the beginning, at this weird fucking like horror con convention for science nerds. Like, what is it and why are they all there?
Well, it took me a while to understand the start of this movie, and I kind of got lost in the characters and how they were connected in the way that they were. Like, obviously, I understood Jeff Goldblum's character from the off, what he was, but it was his interaction with Gina Davis and how they ended up pairing together, because it made no sense for her to be there, and they don't explain that she is a journalist up until 15 minutes into the movie. And I'm like, why are you two together? This makes very little sense. It's like a big like art gallery exposition for like scientists.
Yeah,
but she's clearly
like,
neither.
Yeah, it's like For the Love of Horror, but for the love of science. It's
pretty
it's
much
weird...
yeah.
I'm going to say she is a very silly person, like a really unsafe.
In terms of what?
Unsafe. So she meets this guy. Yes, he's a scientist. He's a little bit charming, but you can see under his suit that he's basically rippling out of. He's a bit jacked. He's like, "Oh, would you like to come back for an interview?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." Like, no hesitation, and goes off to an abandoned warehouse. And at no point, even when going into the abandoned warehouse, does she go, "Do you know what? I think this might be unsafe. I'm going to let someone know where I am." No, she's like, "Yeah, this is fine."
Yeah, well, I mean, this is back in the day when you didn't have cell phones and stuff, so she'll have had to just been brave to get the scoop that she wanted. But I do agree, it's very careless on her part to be going unaided into a dingy warehouse down the back of an alley.
Yeah, and I find his character so sleazy.
Oh, you see, I'm completely on the opposite end of this, because I love Jeff Goldblum as an actor anyway, but I think this is, without question, his best performance on screen. He's, as you mentioned, so charismatic. And considering he's playing the most stereotypical nerd character you could possibly imagine, he's so charming. Like, everything he says just oozes charisma. And he does it in a way where, like, him as a person doesn't even realize how cool and slick he actually is.
Yeah, I don't get that from him. I get like the, "Hey, do you want to come back? Come and see my test tubes. I've got a really cool science experiment you would probably like to play with." That's the vibe I get from him.
Yeah, he's going to create a human centipede in his warehouse kind of vibe.
Yeah, he's proper creepy. And I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of Jeff Goldblum. I still think his best role is Jurassic Park. This is a close second. I'm going to get it out there. I don't particularly like this movie. Like this movie, I find for the most part is very, very, very slow. Once it gets going, once you get into like shit's going down, I really enjoyed the end of this movie. But this first half, I was doom scrolling my phone. I was like getting up and getting a drink, like pausing to go to the toilet because I was just so disinterested. I couldn't give two fucks about either of these two characters. And I don't know if that's because of the way they come across on screen or because of the mood I was in. But like the opening of this movie, I was like, what is this?
I'm surprised you say that because I was on completely the opposite end of the spectrum with this. I found both of them to be very engaging. I found the relationship dynamics between the two was very compelling to watch and see how it progressed based on her interest for her career purposes, but then slowly becoming besotted by him because he has this really like geeky, charming quality about him, and you can see her slowly warming to that side of his character. And then you have the introduction of her ex-boyfriend, who's also her boss, which throws a massive spanner in the works between the two of them and creates this weird love triangle thing, which I was really, really invested in. Without the introduction of the whole Cronenberg fly thing, it was the whole very solid character development setup that really captured me for a good percentage of this movie as well. One thing I will say that I have to agree with you on in terms of pacing, I think the issue that it wasn't something that I took an issue with in terms of pacing. It was when we reached the climax, which feels very weird on an episode to be talking about the climax so early on. But since we don't have a run through anymore, it's okay. We're allowed to do that. Is once we get to the end and everything reaches such a massive height, it feels like I want more from that height. You know, it gets there and then we get the end of the movie and I'm like, oh, like, no, let's keep going. Let's give us more. Don't end it like this.
That's what The Fly 2 is for. But like,
no, I don't think it actually is.
No, it's really not. Like you say, like their character, like she slowly gets besotted with him. She goes back, he shows her his 2 metal love eggs, and then they're having sex. Like there's no slow in this at all. Like, and I'm going to say the set design for this is incredible. These 2 pods look brilliant now. Like, I can't imagine in 86 sitting in the cinema and watching this. This must have been like, wow. But like, even now, I look at it and go, that is so solid, like design, like the light from the underneath. And there's an actual live baboon in this, which blew my mind. I've never seen another movie with a live baboon ever.
The 80s was great for stuff like this because quite a lot of movies did have actual animals in them, which you don't get anymore. It's all just CGI and it's disappointing. Like some of my childhood favorites, such as Dunstan Checks In. Do you remember that one with the orangutan in the hotel? Fucking amazing movie. And things like that, you have actual animals in, and it adds authenticity to it. And seeing this baboon, which is a very savage creature, by the way, hanging around Jeff Goldblum's neck just so casually, like the best pals, is wild.
Yeah, like it's like all I know of baboons is what I've seen on like documentaries where they like rip a bird in half and kick its head around for fun. They're really aggressive, and this thing's like cuddling him and giving him a kiss, and like he's like, oh, come on, let's get you in and let's try and teleport you. No, first he can teleport inanimate objects. So he's making a teleportation device and sending stuff from pod 1 to pod 2. And he can do anything that has no like living tissue that's not complicated. So he can transfer, like he takes our stock in and transfers that. And then he is it a plant he transfers as well?
No, because that would be considered as an object, wouldn't it? A living object. I don't think it was a plant. I can't remember what it was, but you see him do it with various inanimate objects. Say, for instance, like a stapler and stuff like that. But again, like they do a really good job of, even before shit goes off, they do a good job of building towards the science of the movie and explaining the inanimate, that they can't do it with living tissue and that he has to train the computer to understand the organic breakdowns. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but you know the scientific version of human tissue and how, and it has to train it in a certain way, which I was just in awe by. I was like constantly just like, oh, that's really cool. Like, yeah, of course you'd have to do that. I mean, it's not quite AI level that we have today, but the computer system that he's working on,
Yeah,
it's
but
really clever.
it does stack up the same way that you talk to, and you, like anyone who works with any sort of AI and plays with any sort of chatbots, you train them. You train
Yeah.
them to know what you're asking and what you want. And like, for example, with Gladys, when I asked Gladys for, can you give me your thoughts on this movie, or can you give me a score on this movie? She knows instantly, like, the format I want that in. She doesn't just
Which is
blurt
wild.
out. Yeah, it's crazy, but that's exactly how they work. And that's something that a lot of 80s movies done, was kind of predicted the future. And I think there's this element of science fiction becomes science fact. They make these things in movies, and there's a real scientist sat somewhere going, that's a really
I could
good
do that.
idea. I could do that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And they do. Like, a prime example is The Fast and the Furious. I know it's not a horror movie, but in the first movie, they've got computer controlled nitrous oxide release. That was not a thing when that movie came out. Complete fiction. Within 5 years, every drag car in the planet that had nitrous oxide tanks had them computer controlled.
All thanks to The Fast and the Furious, which is
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that movie
insane.
actually made a scientific milestone for somebody.
Also, Gina Davis in this is so career driven, like all the way through. Like, she has this first meeting with him. She goes off to her boss, tries selling it to her boss, who's her ex-boyfriend, and he's a dick. I hate this guy.
Yeah, I love how he addresses Jeff Goldblum as a magician, and it kind of sticks as a running gag throughout the movie.
Yeah, because he turns around and goes, "Oh, it's the old trick. You've fallen for the oldest trick in the book." And when he said it, I was like, "How many scientists' houses have you gone back to where they've gone, look, I'm going to transport something from here to here. Look at that magic." But Jeff Goldblum turns up at the press office because he doesn't want her to run the story, and this is where he's like, the magician, oh hello, I'm so and so. Like, their interaction is great because he is the stereotypical jealous ex, and he plays it very well.
Oh, he's such a dick, and he's got like a key to her apartment, and he's showering when she comes home from work and stuff, and he's just an all-round sleazeball. And even in moments of distress for Gina Davis's character throughout, his immediate reaction to comfort her is, do you want to have sex? It could just be casual. We could just have friendly sex. It doesn't mean anything. I'm like, oh, you disgust me.
Yeah, like the thing is, everyone loves friends with benefits, but like, they are not there. Like, he's the ex, she hates him. She has to work for him. Like, that's not a thing. Yeah, he's a bad dude. Really bad.
I don't like him at all. But I love how when Jeff Goldblum in that scene, when he comes into the office and the guy's like, oh, your magician's here. And he clicks on and realizes, because he's going there to sort of be like, you can't release this story. It's not ready yet. I'm not complete. If you release this, they'll take it off me. Because he's doing all this off the back of funding for something he shouldn't really be working on. But he's like, well, they don't bother. He gives a real good exposition scene. He's like, they don't bother me. I don't bother them. They keep me funded. As long as I give them results on other stuff, they keep me to myself. And also as well, they do a good job of saying, because they do away with the science of it as well without having to explain it, by saying that Jeff Goldblum himself doesn't understand it. He just basically tells them that he needs certain machines making, and then he just puts them all together. So he doesn't tell them what they're for, but he's like, oh, I need a so-and-so, or I need this, this, and this. And then he'll just put them all together like an IKEA flat pack, hoping that it'll work. And if it doesn't, he just orders another part based around what he wants, which was really cool, because it does away with how having to explain to us as an audience the true science behind the theory of it.
Yeah, and it's also very true to life, because that's exactly what you've been doing with your VHS player for the last week.
Don't, man. I can't talk about that right now. It's driving me up the wall.
For anyone who doesn't know, Mark bought an old VHS that doesn't work, and he's trying to rebuild it. Go and follow him on Instagram, VHS from the Crypt, and check in on his lives when he does them. It's the most... Like, I checked in on you the other day, and I kept going back, because every time I went back, you were like scratching your head and looking at it going, oh, it's not going together. And then like everyone's just like ribbing you because you were watching Halloween 4, and I can see all you wanted to do was turn around and go, fuck off and leave me alone. And I was leading the charge going, is that H4 in the background? Look at that shit.
Yeah, you were rallying the troops, being the leader of the arseholes. I was like, fuck's sake, man. I was really trying to concentrate, and I could see out the corner of my eye that you were just riling me up.
What are friends for?
Exactly.
I like the development of the relationship, we'll call it that. I like the fact that she kind of moves in, pretty much moves in with him, which I don't know is necessarily a thing that people do that quickly, but it works for this movie. Also, Gina Davis walking around in nothing but Jeff Goldblum's shirt for the majority of this movie is a plus point for me. I'm not going to lie. Massive crush on Gina Davis.
She is a beautiful, beautiful woman, and that highlights it perfectly in this movie. I think she looks stunning throughout.
Yeah, and to be fair to Jeff Goldblum, he is an absolute stud in this. Like his physique in this is to be admired, and I'm very jealous of that physique.
It's like Bruce Lee level shredded at this point.
Yeah, and all they're doing is like literally, this is a 20-minute section of this film. They have sex, they teleport something. They have sex, they teleport something else, until they get to the point where he's like, I think we're ready for a live one. And he teleports the baboon. And
which I knew was going to end really badly, and they'd already introduced this baboon in a way that was like a proper lovable, friendly creature. And I was like, no, don't put it in. It's not ready. Don't put the baboon in the machine.
It turns out the machine is also a microwave, because that's what it done to the baboon.
Yeah, so they figure out that it turned it inside out. It didn't necessarily cook it like a microwave, but it couldn't put them, as we've already explained about the physics of the humans or life going through it. It can't process it properly, so it turned it inside out, and it like tries to crawl out of the hub, and it's like one eye sticking up, and all its guts are on the outside, and it's practical effects, man. Let's just say how amazing the practical effects are in this.
The practical in this is arguably the best practical effects for any movie in the 80s. This and The Thing are as good as practical effects get.
Yeah, and I was just mesmerized by them all. The only one that I didn't particularly like is when later on, when Jeff Goldblum is like half fly, half human. He's not like quite a fly yet, but he's not quite a human either. He basically looks like somebody stuck Mr. Blobby next to a space heater.
Yeah.
It was a bit weird. I mean, it was the 80s. I'll let it pass. And I think in comparison to the rest of the movie, it still holds up really, really well. The practical effects are phenomenal. But there was just that one scene where it was like on the ledge at the top of that building. And I was like, oh, yeah, you look like you've just been in a plastic suit and then stuck next to a space heater. It doesn't look the best. But hey, I'm not going to grumble too much.
How much did you laugh after the baboon died, and then he's talking to the other baboon he had? He's like, I'm really sorry what I done to your brother. You're like, fucking hell, man.
Yeah. I mean, the heart was there, wasn't it?
I won't make that mistake with you. And this baboon's like looking past him going, Derek? Derek, are you okay? I also like the way they explain that it doesn't do things properly. So he does a steak. So in this sort of montage of sex and teleportation, after he's done the baboon, he teleports a steak, and he he cooks a normal steak and a teleported steak, and gets Gina Davis to try one. She's like, "Oh, that one steak. This one tastes synthetic." And he's like, and he has this realization where he's like, yeah, you've just solved it. And away he goes, and he taps away on it. And then within minutes, he's teleported the other baboon. He's like, you'll be fine. The baboons in this, like going into a confined pod and being sprayed with dry ice and bright lights, must have been quite traumatic for them. Like when they open that pod, that baboon comes out at about 80 miles an hour.
And jump straight into his arms.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing for me as well is like, where do you even get baboons from? Like, who trains baboons to be actors in movies?
I don't know.
Like, I know you get like trained dogs to be like Lassie and things like that. But like, who goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a baboon and then I'm going to train it and then I'm going to make loads of money off it because it's going to be a Hollywood superstar.
I don't know. And I would say this is the only famous baboon.
If you're excluding cartoons, then yeah, of course. Because if we're talking cartoons, it's got to go to Rafiki from The Lion King.
Yeah. Okay. But no, actual live baboons. This is the only live actor baboon that I am aware of, and his acting credits consist of one.
Do you reckon it's the same baboon playing his brother, or do you reckon they were actually brothers?
No, it's 100%. This is one baboon. This did not have the budget for two baboons.
I didn't know whether it was a whole like Cody thing from Zack and Cody. That's the one, Zack and Cody. The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Wow, what a show.
Yeah, you had the female equivalent of that was Sister.
Yes, that's right. Were they sisters, or was they the same person?
I think they were actually sisters. Someone call in and let us know, because I can't remember.
Right. Because like on Parent Trap, there was only one Lindsay Lohan, which we all know.
And then you had the Olsen twins as well, who actually were twins.
Yeah. I don't know many others, apart from, like you say, Sister, and then Zack and Cody. But he was really cool, because in Friends, he played Ben.
Yes, he did.
But like they both took turns playing Ben.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They just used to take turns. But it was the same. They both played Ben and Friends, but then they both got credited for playing the same character. But there was like these two British ones, these two British twin brothers. One of them was like on Emmerdale, and one of them was on Shameless. But they looked identical, and everyone thought they were both the same person on two separate shows. But it wasn't. They were just identical twins, both actors on two separate different shows, playing different characters.
Well, maybe these baboons were identical twins.
This is what I'm getting at. I need to know.
Derek and Danny.
Wow, trying to condense this episode down to within an hour, and I'm rambling my head off about Sweet Life of Zack and Cody for 20 minutes.
You've thrown me. Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Right.
I apologize.
Jeff Goldblum has a moment where he's like, it's the middle of the night and he's laying there in bed and he's next to Gina Davis, and what on earth possessed him to get out of bed, I will never know, because I wouldn't have moved. But he gets out of bed and he teleports himself. And this is where I actually got really invested in the movie. So once he teleports himself, you see a fly going with him. And they do the cool thing where they show you the computer screen and it shows you the fly and the man, and it shows you it put it together in very like 80s computer graphics.
Yeah, I love this. I have a real soft spot for this whole, like the Matrix green coding text on computers from the 80s.
Yeah, and then it sort of zooms out, and all these bits that are coming together is just a fly. It's like, okay. They handle the changes in him very, very well. So it's a very subtle change at first. Like he notices he's a lot faster, he's a lot stronger, he's got a lot more energy. There's a scene where he's kissing Gina Davis, like, should we go again? She's like, it's been 9 times already. He's like, yeah, but I'm really feeling it. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, obviously he doesn't know that the fly's gone in there with him. He just thinks that, because that's one thing that I like, is that he's trying to get Gina Davis to do the same process later on. He's like, do it. I feel revitalized. I feel reborn. I hardly sleep. I hardly eat. I don't need to take breaks or exercise. I feel like, how does he word it? I can't remember how he words it, but he's basically trying to say that he's a superior race at this point, and he is basically going to turn everybody into this superior being by going through the teleporter. He's going to be a billionaire and the most famous man on the planet for doing so.
Yeah, he gets this kind of like almost bravado because he's done it. Like it's given him such a confidence. And it would, like, if you all of a sudden had double energy, had to sleep half as much as you do, and felt incredible all the time, you would have that moment where you go, I'm fucking untouchable. Like, I am the king of the world.
There's a white powder that does the exact same thing. I don't condone it, children. Don't listen to me.
But also that has a very similar downside, a little bit like this.
That is very true. Yes, it does.
And you said about white powder, how much sugar does he put in his coffee?
Oh, that is brilliant. And he's unaware that he's doing it as well. And he's just piling it in, more sugar, more sugar. And that's
Yeah,
when that's when Gina Davis first start to notice is the like subtle changes in his behavior. Like, 'cause obviously she doesn't know that it's a fly either, but she's like, this isn't right. Like, yeah, it was very amazing at first, but this crack's starting to appear now.
yeah, and he's also starting to show sort of almost like blemishy on his skin. Like looks like
Like
almost
puberty
like,
kind of stuff.
yeah, like teenage spots kind of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
uh, and this is what I mean where it's done very subtly. Like at this point, it's not glaringly obvious. And he has a moment where he's desperate to get Gina Davis to go in the machine. She's like, "No, you've changed. I can't do this anymore. Fuck you." And she walks out. And he's like, "Well, I'll just find someone else then." And he goes to the bar from over the top. This scene is
I love it.
exceptional.
It is so fucking cool. But again, like before we get to that scene, I do like how nonchalant he is about just immediately binning Gina Davis off. He's like, well, if you don't want to partake, don't worry, I'll just go find somebody else. And considering the contrast in his character to 10 minutes ago, where he's loving, caring, constantly attentive to whatever needs or emotion she needs from him, to see him be this way is very jarring to watch, because it does happen subtly, but at the same time it happens very quickly, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. I don't know how to word that in a way that makes sense, but it is a
they
slow
they
change for
move
him. But
they move this section of the movie moves very quickly. It's shown over a period of time, but the
yeah,
actual shots you get is very like bang, 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 bang. He's an asshole now.
yeah, and it's like, and I think that works as well, because you do have that slow build pace of the character development throughout, that when we do get to this point, because it happens so quickly, it is such a juxtaposition between the two performances we've seen within the space of what, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, and like I think they do a good job in moving it on, because at this point, I'll be honest, I'd kind of lost the will to live. Like this was so
I can't
slow.
believe that.
Yeah, I there's some movies that just don't vibe with me, and this movie just doesn't. Like the first half of it, definitely, I'm just like, oh, let's go, come on. I know he turns into a fly. Make him be a fly already. That's kind of where I was. I was very
I think that's
petulant
half the problem,
child.
is because because you kind of know what direction this is taking, because it does take a while to get there. I think, like, what's your history on this movie? Like, you've seen this before, obviously.
Twice before this.
Yeah, like for me, I've seen this movie when I was a kid. So like watching it again this time was like basically watching it for the first time ever. I remember seeing it, and I remember certain scenes from it that are like standout bits of the movie, but watching it again this time in its entirety as an adult and paying attention to the story, it felt like I was watching it for the first time. So I wasn't necessarily like, let's get to the good bits, because everything that had come before it was sort of new to me in my mind. So I guess that's why I didn't have that need to rush through it the same way that you kind of feel like you did.
Yeah, I definitely did. And this scene in the bar is one of the scenes I wanted to get to because I love this scene. Take out the incredibly sort of sexist 80s we own women attitude where Jeffrey was like, I'll give you an arm wrestle next. He's like, yeah, okay, so I'll arm wrestle you for the woman. And this bloke's like, yeah, okay.
So
This one's like,
caveman, isn't it?
this one was like, what do you mean, okay? He's like, don't worry, I'll beat him. You can talk
But he
us through
doesn't.
you could talk us through the remake of Over the Top.
Yes, I love this. It was so cool. And I like this whole bar 80s aesthetic that they have going on here, with the lights and the music and the tough man bravado that they've got going on. And again, like you mentioned, with the women just sitting there doing as they're told. It's a very poor representation of humans in general when they do this in movies, especially in the 70s and 80s. I don't know if women were necessarily like that in the 70s and 80s, but I can only assume that they had their own mind and were able to speak up when they needed to back in the day. Anyway, that aside, let's talk about some arm wrestling. So, the cool thing about this is when they do sit down, this guy is like probably 4 times the size of Jeff Goldblum at this point. And we've already addressed that Jeff Goldblum looks ripped in this movie. But to see him next to this gigantic man, it's like, right, okay, you've got no chance of winning this competition here. But he does. And not only does he beat him with ease, but he snaps his arm off and you see the bone poke out through the skin. And again, practical effects are just fucking perfect. This is a very gory, gnarly scene.
It is really gory. It's really kind of like, especially someone who shattered their forearm before. I know what that feels like.
How could you do that?
You see that big scar up my arm here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got plates and pins, and there was a point when I first done that, the doctors were considering amputation.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, I had one specialist come around and said, "We think the best option is to amputate," and I went, "What's the second best option?"
We're going to turn you into Wolverine instead.
Yeah, I was about 25, 26. I used to do downhill mountain biking, and I was going down a hill. I turned my handlebars and my wheel didn't turn. So when I turned it back to kind of like correct it, it bit straight away. It turned my wheel sideways. I went up over the handlebars on probably close to a 45-degree angle. And I must have gone, I don't know, 12 foot forward, about 8 foot in the air. And I landed and I put my hands down and felt a snap, but I thought it was my leg. I stood up to brush like a big cut on my leg. And as I done that, this part of my arm just went like swung down.
Yeah, that sounds awful, man. I've never broken a single bone in my body, ever. And I do mad shit all the time. And I work at extreme heights on roofs daily. I've never fallen to a point. I mean, I say that I did fall off a ladder previously this Christmas, which really hurt. But I didn't break anything. Maybe I am Bruce Willis from Unbreakable.
It was going through my mind, and I missed a glass. After he wins this arm wrestle, though, he literally gets the girl, and all of a sudden she's like, "Yeah, you beat the tough guy," and she goes with him.
And willingly as well. Like there was no like fight from her, as if to say, "I don't know you. This is weird. This is a bit strange." She's like, "Okay, yeah, you won. Please take me home and ravage me in your warehouse."
But no, she did say, "I'd like to go to a few more bars first." And he's like, "Yeah, okay, I can do that."
Oh, did she?
Yeah,
I missed that bit.
And then he does go and ravage her in the warehouse. And it's the following morning. He's like, "Oh, I've got this thing. You need to go in it. It's going to be really cool." And he's like dragging her across the room, going, "You're going to like it." And this is where Gina Davis. Yeah, it's very forceful. And this is where Gina Davis arrives. And he's like, she's like, "Who's this?" He's like, yeah, did I say I live with my mother? Which is brilliant because this was the thing the girl told him earlier.
Yeah.
Most iconic line in this movie: "Be afraid, be very afraid."
Very cool. I always forgot that. Like, I know that quote. Like, I know that quote because it's synonymous with horror. Everybody says it for everything. I never knew it was from The Fly. That's how long ago it is that I've seen this movie. So when she said it, I was like, cool.
Thing is, this girl's like, "Okay, right, well, I'm going to get my bag and I'm just going to go. I'm going to leave you two with whatever this is. Thanks for last night. It was fun," and just leaves.
Yeah.
I like that Gina Davis kind of pushes him here, and he basically tells her to fuck off. And it leads us down a path where she kind of periodically checks in on him. And every time she comes back, his makeup effects have got more and more extreme. Like he can climb walls now. Like the scene where he's like scrambling up the wall. I'm assuming that was done in a very Nightmare on Elm Street kind of revolving room.
Rolling room.
Yeah,
rolling room, definitely. I don't know that for a fact. But there is no way that was wires or CGI due to the way he was moving up and down the wall. It would appear to me that it was a rolling room. The way that he transitions from ceiling to wall and then back down to floor so casually, I can only assume that that's how it was done. I'd be very surprised to learn that it was done a different way other than that.
Yeah, Yeah, it looks brilliant. His makeup effects here look brilliant. This is where I get a little bit hazy, and I'm going to be honest. I get hazy here because I was having a drink when I watched this. I watched it on a Saturday night. How does it go from him all of a sudden deciding he's going to go and get Gina Davis and make her the same? At what point does that happen? Because I cannot remember why it happens.
She finds out she's pregnant, and he overhears the fact that she's pregnant, and then creepy ex-boyfriend comes in to help him get aborted. But as she's in the abortion clinic at 3 o'clock in the morning, as they convince the doctor, he's like, "You have to do it now. You have to do it now. I need this thing out of me." He bursts in through the hospital window and then like picks her up like Frankenstein and carries her off back to the warehouse. And this is where it's like, this is really cool as well, because he knows that he's done for, in a sense. He's kind of accepted his fate. I'm turning into a fly. This is what I'm becoming now. But what we need to do to replicate this is to all of us go in together, and then all three of us will get melded into one person, and we will be a family together. And I'm like, I kind of want to see what comes out the other end.
Jeff Goldblum's abs and hair with Gina Davis's legs and boobs.
Yeah, and then just a baby head, like a fetus head.
Yeah,
and then like... fly wings, and it can fly and shit. That would be cool.
See, the options they had were endless, and they squandered them all.
They did, unfortunately.
They squandered them all with the boyfriend coming to save her, which, like, it's the only noble thing he does in the movie. And even doing this, I wanted him to die.
Yeah, and again, I don't feel like he was doing it for her benefit either. I feel like it was more a case of, let's get this dude out of the picture so I can have sex with my ex-girlfriend again. When he does die, well, he doesn't die. Does he die? I can't remember the ending. Yeah, I remember him getting his leg disintegrated, which is fucking amazing.
Yeah, there's like, a really
when Jeff
cool...
Goldblum...
Yeah, if it does the bit with the foot, like there's a really cool deleted scene. Go and find it on YouTube or wherever you can. There's a really cool deleted scene where it's about a minute and a half, and it's just Jeff Goldblum spitting on the severed foot and sucking it like a lollipop. It's amazing.
I'll have to go find that. That sounds cool. But I really love this scene in particular. It reminded me very much of like a Roger Corman-esque Trauma style movie, where he's got like the white gump coming out of his mouth and it like goes onto his leg and stuff. Because one thing they do really good about setting this scene up as well is earlier on, he's like documenting himself around the dinner table and he's like, oh, we need to film this. We need to document it. Because again, the whole thing is Gina Davis documenting his transition in order to showcase his discovery, basically. So we get a lot of cool scenes of Jeff Goldblum talking to the camera, basically setting up like a documentary style stuff, but a behind the scenes version of it. And he explains how he can no longer eat solids, and that the only way he's discovered he can eat food is to be like a fly, and he has to spit this gunk out, and he starts doing it with food on the table. And it's revolting. I wouldn't recommend watching this movie while you're trying to eat your dinner.
No, definitely not. But like all of those things are really cool. Like they take really good elements from the actual Fly, and I really am so happy they didn't do what they done in the original Fly, which was just a head swap. So like in the original movie, like
I haven't seen
Jeff Gold, it's just literally a head swap, and I'm glad they didn't do that. They take him down, and it's I'll be honest, I kind of feel sorry for him because it's not his fault, really, is it?
No. I mean, do they take him down here? Because he becomes full Fly, doesn't he? You see the head split and the actual Fly come through. And then this is a point where he tries to take her into the machine, and he locks her in and puts himself in the other one.
Yeah, and then
this is how they take him down.
Yeah, matey cuts the cables that connect the two. So basically he just...
And that frees Gina Davis.
Yeah.
So he goes back to the original thing, doesn't it? And it like basically turns him inside out.
Yeah, and
which is again incredible.
Really, really cool. At the end of this, she doesn't have the baby at the end of this, does she? No,
she just shoots him. She shoots him as he crawls out the teleporter. She shoots him, and then they leave.
Because there's a scene where she has a dream where she gives birth to like a maggot, which is cool.
That is fucking revolting. I do like that. But
The
again, we have The Fly 2, which basically follows that premise. I don't know if Gina Davis returns to it, but The Fly 2 is basically the story of that baby. I haven't watched it yet.
I have seen it once, and it will probably be the only time I watch it, unless it ends up on this show.
Oh, brilliant. In that case, let's get it on the show.
Yeah. Shall we take a quick break?
Yeah, let's call it, man.
After this episode, why not check out the Paranormal Misfits podcast? Hosted by Chrissy and Nino, this show looks at everything paranormal, conspiracy theories, murder. They also do reviews into horror movies too. This show has it all. Also available on the You Run Podcast Network, the horror-friendly podcast, hosted by Charlie, Katie and Chantel. This hilarious review podcast covers movies from the past, the present, and everything else in between. You do not want to miss this great addition to the You Run Podcast Network. And all of these shows and many more are all available at yourunpodcast.com. So that brings us on to facts and the final ever 3-word review. Which would you like to do first?
Let's do the facts first.
Okay. It took Jeff Goldblum nearly 5 hours every day to get into the extensive makeup. And because they shot over such a long period of time, it was like 20 days straight of 5 hours in a chair having prosthetics put on.
That's one thing about Hollywood where they do use practical makeup effects that I have a lot of respect for these actors. So one of the biggest examples for me is Gary Oldman. Like that dude, everything he seems to do these days is like he is in heavy prosthetics, like Dracula, Hannibal when he played I can't remember the character's name now, but then Mason Verger, and then he had to spend like 6 hours, 7 hours a day getting the prosthetics on. And that's one thing as well that I really appreciate about the Marvel movies. A lot of them, like Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that, most of the actors in that have to be in a chair for 6 to 7 hours before they even start their what is sometimes considered a 12-hour day shoot just to get it on. And then they have to then come back to get it off. I know the process to remove it's a lot shorter, but still, like, you're talking sometimes 18-hour days just to get that look, which is so commendable. And we talked in the past about how Robert Englund is the only person who can play Freddy Krueger and his refusal to do it anymore because he just can't sit in the makeup chair. I get it, man. I don't think I could.
Yeah.
Like, if you listen to this show and if you watch it on YouTube, you constantly see me fidgeting all the time because I just can't sit still in a chair. So I don't think I could do it.
There would be a makeup artist every 2 seconds flicking you on the forehead to remind you to sit still.
I can't. I can never sit still.
The line "be afraid, be very afraid" actually comes from Mel Brooks. So this is a Mel Brooks movie, which is bizarre. Mel Brooks and David Cronenberg. So David Cronenberg turned around to Mel Brooks and went, "What do you think people's reaction to The Fly would be?" And Mel Brooks said, "Be afraid, be very afraid," and that became the line in the movie.
Cool.
The vomit that comes out of Jeff Goldblum's mouth, they had to put something in his mouth that he could actually have there. So they made a mixture of honey, eggs, and milk.
Oh, it's like pancake batter uncooked.
Yeah, he'd like fill his mouth with that and then like spit it out. No.
That sounds revolting, yeah. No. I think the honey must obviously just be there to sweeten the disgusting taste of eggs and milk together.
We nearly got a very, very, very different Seth Brundle character in this. Michael Keaton was offered the role but turned it down.
I think that would have been incredible. As much as I love Jeff Goldblum in this movie, I think if any other actor on the planet could bring this character to life, it is Michael Keaton.
Yeah, because he can do the science nerd. Like he done it in Duplicity, and I love that movie. That's such a cool movie.
Yes. And he doesn't have a problem with makeup effects and things like that. I think he would have been a very, very solid casting choice for this.
Yeah, and I think he would have taken it closer to the Beetlejuice character, considering originally lined up for this. When Michael Keaton was in line to get the role, the director that was lined up was Tim Burton.
Ooh, now that is a conflicting idea. Because I love Tim Burton when Tim Burton's in his own world. But to adapt this story with a Tim Burton aesthetic, I don't know if that would have worked for me.
It would
You'd have had like a very Gotham thing, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it'd have been a very different movie. Tim Burton and Michael Keaton doing The Fly. I'll be honest, I'd watch it out of
Oh,
curiosity
definitely.
more than anything else. I'd have to see it.
But it
Um,
would be a very different movie to what we got.
and finally, there was another actor who turned this down that I can't, in a million years, I can't wrap my head around this character playing Seth Brundle, and that was Mel Gibson, and he turned this down to do Lethal Weapon.
I like Mel Gibson. I know the guy gets a lot of stick, but I think he's an incredible actor, and he has a vast range, as we've seen from what he's done over his career. I think he could have pulled it off. But again, it would have been a very different movie entirely had he taken the role. And the
Yeah,
fact that if he didn't take it, we wouldn't have got Lethal Weapon. That's a
yeah,
world I'm happy to live in.
yeah,
Lethal Weapon's awesome.
yeah, he definitely needs to do the Lethal Weapon thing. On Lethal Weapon, have you watched the new Beverly Hills Cop yet?
Yes, it's fucking awesome to a certain degree. It's a great nostalgia bump.
Yeah,
But there's one thing that movie toes the line with a little bit too much, and that is things being there for the sake of callbacks.
mhm,
Like there was a lot of scenes where I was really invested. I was like, yes, Beverly Hills Cop, woo! And then it's like they do like a joke from like the first movie, and I'm like, oh, you've just pulled me out of it now because I know you've just done that purposefully just for the sake of fan service. But in actual fact, all you've done is taken me out of the scene that you're representing here. But for
yeah,
what it was still great. I still really, really liked it, but it's not as good as the first three. And the
no,
third one is the weakest of those three, and I still think that's better than Axel F. But it was nice. It was nice to go back and revisit these characters again. Taggart looks like he needs to sit down a lot in this movie.
so, so, so does Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy needs to stay away from donuts. Like what happened?
I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt in that movie though. I love him as an actor, so he was really cool in this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I guess it's time to do it. It's yeah, it's time. That's enough of that. It is the final ever three-word reviews. Three-word reviews this week come from X and Instagram. Over on X, AMPFX Studios, Gina Davis, Schwing, and they are a
Perfect.
visual effects makeup artist and filmmaker and incredibly talented at what they do. Movies for days. Want an arm wrestle?
Not with Brundlefly, I don't.
Definitely not. And that's Newman from Movies for Days, a part of the Eurun Podcast Network. Brilliant show he's got over there. Sledgehammer Horror, best remake ever. It's a great remake. I don't think it's the best personally.
No, I haven't seen the original, so to me, I never usually consider this a remake. It's the same as John Carpenter's The Thing. It is a remake technically, but because the movie that it's remaking is so old, it's hard to consider it a remake. When you take movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and you remake those, yes, I get it. Or Halloween and such. That's like, yeah, you're making a remake of a movie that's within my generation that I also love the original. But for me to never have ever seen the original Fly or to never have seen the original Thing or movies like The Mummy and Dracula's and things like that, which I have started watching quite a few of those Universal Monsters movies. But to have those come out and be like, this is a remake, it's like, not to me, it's not.
Yeah, to me, this is brand spanking new.
Yeah.
Over on Instagram, Lady Crisis, make me sick. Obviously, Lady Crisis, guest on the show, excellent TikTok account. She was here for Twilight, New Moon, which
fuck's sake.
incredibly is one of our most listened to episodes this year.
I finished them all now as well. I've done them all.
Oh, good. New Twilight movie coming next year. This girl loves horror. Almost threw up. And this is Becky, one half of the Girl and the Gay podcast. But also, this girl loves horror. Go and follow her on Instagram. Really, really cool account. Pop culture reflections. Body horror perfection.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And that's Justin, host of the Pop Culture Reflections podcast, also a member of the You Run Podcast Network. It wouldn't be the perfect end to 3-word reviews if we didn't have the person who gave us our very first 3-word review, and that's Skellington Fan. This is Skelly, former guest of the show, amazing account, and an amazing person. She's gone simply with "he be nasty."
He'd be very nasty.
He is. Bucket of Chum podcast, Sexy Brundlefly. Bucket of Chum podcast is a podcast all about shark movies in every variation you could possibly imagine.
How do I not know this podcast?
Like if you ever want to find an obscure shark movie, just scroll through their back catalogue and there will be hundreds of movies you've never heard of that contain sharks.
What's that? Bucket of Chum.
Bucket of Chum podcast.
Right,
and finally, Dissect That Film, Gooey Flyman, and they're a comedy-filled movie podcast. And that is the final ever 3-word reviews. There we go. That's all it gets this time. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been involved in 3-word reviews from the very beginning, every week in, week out. There are going to be lots of new interactive features coming. I hope you latch onto them and they mean as much to you as 3-word reviews, because it was a hard choice for me and Mark to bin that feature. Yeah. A really hard choice. But
I think so. And I love 3-word reviews. I do. I know I moaned about it over the last few episodes, saying that people needed to up their game. I didn't mean it. I love it, really. I was just trying to encourage people to just be a little bit more creative. But yeah, it is the end of an era. But you know, there's plenty of new things on the horizon.
There is.
Stay tuned.
I'm going to round this up first because I'm going to be more negative than you are. This movie is dull as fuck until the last 20 minutes. I think it's a very well shot movie. It's a very well acted movie. It's a very well paced movie. Visual effects are out of this world. Performances, especially from Jeff Goldblum, are phenomenal. It's just a really boring, slow story that I wasn't that invested in. Like when I look at a movie and the highlights for me are the fact it has a real live baboon in it and Gina Davis in a shirt and a pair of pants. And when I take those two and practical effects as the bits that I enjoyed the most, I can't give that movie as much credit as it may deserve. And it's not because it's a bad movie, because it's not. It's just not for me. It's a 3 out of 5 for me.
That is an incredibly low score for a movie that this is as good as this. Excuse me. Again, I don't have a history with The Fly. It's not something that I've grew up watching. I've watched it once as a child and I had very little memory of it. So for me, this was watching this movie as a first-time experience. Something that I seem to be doing quite a lot of lately with movies. People always tend to find movies like this and go back and say they don't hold up, such as The Dawn of the Dead, which we did recently. I seem to be going the other way with it and finding movies like this and thinking, why have I not been spending more of my time going back and watching movies like this that I haven't seen or at least don't remember watching? The Fly is one of those movies in particular. I think the practical effects are fantastic. I think the direction is great. I really love the character developments and the story building that we get throughout this movie that keeps everything engaging. Casting on point. For me, this is one of Jeff Goldblum's performances, and I really appreciate him and rate him as an actor, and I've seen him in a lot of movies, but I have to say that I think this is probably the best work he has done. Gina Davis, I always love her. She's an absolute diamond, and I think she's great in everything she does, and this is another one of those. I do think this movie in particular as a performance from her suffers in the fact that it is very similar in what she does in Beetlejuice. I don't think there's much variation between the two characters in this movie and Beetlejuice, whereas you take the movie where she was an assassin with Samuel L. Jackson in and you really see what kind of range she does have as an actress.
Is it Goodnight Sweetheart?
Got Long Kiss Goodnight.
Long Kiss Goodnight, and that movie is fucking awesome.
Yeah, and you take her performance in that and you realize, oh, holy shit, she's not just the American sweetheart role that she plays in some of the more popular movies she's been in. I think she's fantastic and she's great in this. Practical effects are incredible. I like the pacing. I do think that it builds well. The only issue I have with the slow build of the pacing is that when we finally get to where we want to be with it, it almost feels that it doesn't spend enough time on the greatness. And that's not to say that I would sacrifice anything that came before it to extend that. All I would maybe do is add more meat to the bone with the last sort of act and a half.
Yeah.
Another shout out that I want to give in terms of why I like this movie as much as I do is the phenomenal score by the legend that is Mr. Howard Shore from Lord of the Rings fame. His score throughout this movie is impeccable. Really, really good. Really sets the tone, really sets the atmosphere throughout. And I think immediately from the opening credit sequence, when you hear that score building, you're like, wow, this is fucking awesome. It's like John Williams level shit. And then you get the title credit that says Howard Shore composer. I was like, oh shit, that's why it sounds so fucking great. So I really like the music and the score to this film. For me, I thought it was great. I really enjoyed my time with it. I do think there's a few issues there that I could probably iron out, such as the ending and the practical effects in certain areas. I know overall they're incredible, but still there is a couple of scenes that I'm like, that's not brilliant. Yeah, I'm going to go with a 4.5 out of 5. I think this is a very, very solid movie and one that will now be part of my annual rotation, I think.
Okay, fair scores. That brings this episode to a close. Anyone and everyone who's listening, let us know what you think of the new format. Like, this is a work in progress as we find our feet with it. And there is something quite special we've saved to the end that will give you an idea of how much effort we're going to be putting into this show moving forward. A huge thank you to everyone for listening. A huge thank you for Imitation Dave, because without him, like, he makes what comes next, in my opinion. Thank you very much for listening and for watching, and we will see you next week. See you all later.
Cheers, guys. See you next week.
You want to die tonight?
Jokes you tell sets the scene. I hang on every word lost in the screen. Your passion for fear is contagious enough. You make me believe in Mark's overblown roundups. You run podcasts or a movie review, unveiling facts and playing games too. Your words paint pictures of darkness and dread, leaving me grinning long after I fled. You run podcasts, horror movie review, unveiling facts and playing games too.